Mark Mullet has now filed official complaints against Bob Ferguson over, I'll just play the clip here, we've played it a couple times, over Bob Ferguson's request that the Secretary of State break the law for him.
After the drawing of straws on Friday afternoon, one of these Bob Fergusons will appear second on the ballot, the other will appear third on the ballot, and I appear number 13 on the ballot. So we're asking the Secretary of State to either move my name up, sort of second essentially, above those two, or move them down below me.
Yeah, move them down. So didn't take, again, I think Secretary of Steve Hobbs in a interview with the Washington State Standard said it would take a first-year law student to recognize that I couldn't do that. Yet the Attorney General of Washington is asking me to do that. And then we knew from Jason Rant's reporting that Steve Hobbs was caught on a hot mic saying that AG Ferguson called him too. And when Steve Hobbs said, I can't do that, he said, bullshit, you can push the envelope. That's the Attorney General demanding the state's elections chief break the law for him. So Mark Mullet has filed ethics complaints. And the Ferguson campaign's already acting like this is some desperate act from Mark Mullet because he's behind in the polls or whatever it is. No, someone had to do this. This is the right thing to do. And I, honestly, even if Mark hadn't been running, I think Mark still would have done this. This is from a press release from the Mullet campaign. On May 13th, Bob Ferguson violated common known rules about lawyers recusing themselves from cases where they have a conflict of interest, along with Washington state executive ethics rules about not using the power of your elected office to benefit your political campaign. He references a state bar code was violated by Bob Ferguson on May 13th when he applied verbal pressure to the Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, to rearrange the order of where candidates would appear on the ballot for governor. In a phone call with Secretary of State on May 13th, Attorney General Bob Ferguson learned that the occupations would be listed next to each Bob Ferguson on the ballot so voters could differentiate between the candidates. But the ballot order would not be rearranged to list himself ahead of the other Bobs. AG Ferguson then applied verbal pressure on Secretary of State Steve Hobbs in violation of RCW, which is about the order on ballots, and rearranged the ballot order as the Ferguson campaign legal team had already demanded in their memo earlier that day. So you've got ethics complaint, Bar Association complaint, entirely appropriate. It is shocking to me. I actually think King 5, I was going to talk about it today, but man, I got lost in the sauce on the crosscut story. One of them did it. I want to say it was, King 5 did an article, AG Bob Ferguson defends campaign letter about the other Bobs, and he just thinks he's in the right. He doesn't see any problem in the world with what he did. And that's the whole issue. We've said before, this whole Bob's thing, putting two other Bob Fergusons on the ballot, like as misguided as it was, it really showed people, if they hadn't seen it already, Bob Ferguson's true colors. I think about Donald Trump, not to bring Donald Trump into it, but remember the phone calls he was eviscerated over, like to the Georgia elections chief? Hey, you need to find however many more votes. That's what he was accused of. How is this any different? How is it any different? You could argue the scale, right? But Democrats lost their ever-loving minds over that. So Donald Trump is a horrible person, unfit to be the president for calling the Georgia elections chief. And Bob Ferguson, though, he's perfectly within his right and righteous to call and pressure the Secretary of State, even after he's already said no, to change the order on the ballot in violation of RCW, and to tell him, bullshit, you can push the envelope, when he's told no, and throws a temper tantrum. Bob Ferguson has a hell of a lot in common with Donald Trump, it turns out. Maybe they should be friends, Maybe Bob Ferguson should stop fighting Trump and they can be buddies. So it's just crazy. So good for Mark Mullet. And this is going to get him shunned even more by his own party, but he's already persona non grata with the Democrats in Washington state. So he's doing the right thing, and we'll follow it. But, Bob's got all his buddies in the bar, and all his buddies in government. And I highly doubt any judge or anyone will go against Bob Ferguson. But we shall see.